Good evening. My name is Mohammad Chowdhury, and it's my privilege to join you today. I studied at St Anne's College at Oxford University between the years of 1986 to 1989, and I read PPE while I was there. I'm joining you today to let you know about my new book, my first book, in fact, which was published just a few months ago in London, and it's called Border Crossings, My Journey as a Western Muslim. It's my first book, and probably not the book that you or I would have expected me to write, since by day job I'm a management consultant and I run the strategy consulting practice in telecommunications and digital economy at PwC, and I'm based in Melbourne in Australia. So I will explain to you a bit more about how it is that I wrote Border Crossings. But before I do that, perhaps let me get you right into it with a short extract to get us going. Heathrow Airport, London. Good morning, sir. Could you step aside, please? I'd like to ask you a few questions. Sure, I reply, rubbing the tiredness out of my eyes, putting up no resistance to the familiar drill. My questioner is evidently a government official undertaking extra surveillance following yesterday's terrorist alerts. I found out about the elevated security at London's airports on BBC News before boarding the crowded British Airways flight 14 hours ago. Where are you arriving from today, sir? Dhaka, Bangladesh, I add, thinking that the sun must just about be setting there now. And what were you doing in Bangladesh, sir? He says with a monotonous drone, leafing through my passport at the same time. I was there on holiday, visiting relatives. I look over the thin-framed, wispy-haired officer as he begins to examine my documents. His drab suit matches the grey, speckled carpet of Terminal 4's arrival hall. Passengers silently weave through orderly queues, some speaking in muffled voices and others looking subdued from jet lag, a total contrast to the cacophony of loudspeaker announcements and disorganisation of Dhaka Airport, where Heathrow's carpets snuffle out noise, the gritty wheels of roller bags and lopsided trolleys click-clack across Dhaka Airport's cracked-up tiles. Back in the first world silence of the UK, I'm already missing that homely untidiness of Bangladesh, the vibrant colours, humid smells, and incessant raising of voices. From his tired attire, I cannot determine whether the officer is from the Metropolitan Police or British Intelligence. He has a kind, bedraggled-looking and spotty face. The thinning hair on his head is longer at the sides than on top. The blemishes on the maroon cover of my British passport include a crease that runs all the way down it, like a white water spring descending a craggy alpine mountain. The officer turns the pages with care, separating the leaves with meticulously shaped fingernails. His professionalism and duty to care momentarily cushion me from the cold reality of my travel experiences today, littered as they are with an incessant amount of scrutiny and suspicion over who I am and why I am travelling. He too asks me about my reasons for travelling so much, about my family origins, and in particular about my frequent visits to the Middle East. I work for an international consulting firm and am involved in a number of assignments around the world, so I have to fly around frequently. Plus I travel a lot personally too, especially to the Middle East and Asia. What about the trips to Syria, sir, and to Lebanon and Jordan? Were these for business also? As he poses the question, I catch him noticing the British Airways frequent flyer identification tag dangling from the strap of my knapsack. He cannot tell that I went to the West Bank last year, since at the conclusion of a 9-hour ordeal at the border crossing, I'd requested the Israeli authorities not to put a stamp in my passport, but to do so on a blank sheet of paper instead. Whilst his questioning is thorough, it is nowhere near as forensic as the Israelis, whose methods are purposeful and meticulous, full of mind games. I don't mention the West Bank trip. Mostly those were holiday trips. One trip to Jordan was for business. I wince at the memory of that awful meeting in Amman some months ago, when the executive we were negotiating with walked out of a heated session. Do you have any particular reason for spending so much time in the Middle East? I'm learning Arabic, and I'd like to go to the region to practice, and I go to Saudi Arabia from time to time to perform the Muslim pilgrimage at Makkah. I feel a desire to get this questioning over with, and to get out of Heathrow and make my way into London. Where were your parents born? The officer asks. My parents, I repeat back, looking at the officer but mumbling the words under my breath. Since childhood, I've been forced to deal with such inquiries, a necessary evil these days for many Muslims who travel a lot, their privilege of anonymity in travel temporarily withdrawn. As time has gone on, I've developed my techniques to a point where I can confidently challenge when needed. You don't really need to know where my parents were born, do you? I reply, nodding my head gently in the direction of my passport, the Queen's coat of arms showing proudly on its cover. I'm employing the same tactic that I used successfully when stopped in Milan's Linate airport a few weeks ago, but that was with a smiling and casual Italian immigration officer who looked like he just wanted to practice his English. Today, I fear I've made an error of judgment by challenging this man barely a few weeks after the 7/7 terrorist attacks in London. The officer looks back at me, speechless, and as the seconds tick by, I wonder what will happen now. So I was just explaining that, you may not have expected Border Crossings to be my first book, but the background to this is that I was born in the UK, in London, and grew up there. And my parents had come as first-generation migrants from Bangladesh, or East Pakistan as it was, when they moved here in the 1960s. And all through our childhood, as growing up as sort of first-generation migrants, our parents were very meticulous about introducing us to the Bengali culture and to our Muslim faith, as well as, of course, very much encouraging us to be British and be very integrated with school and friends and social activities and so on. So I grew up with this sort of balance of trying to sort of, if you like, square up two slightly sort of incompatible cultures and ways of life many times. And one of the things that really, if you like, frustrated me a bit was that we learned how to pray in the Arabic language, and we learned how to read the Quran, which is the sort of holy book for Muslims, in Arabic. And whilst I could read Arabic quite well, I couldn't understand it at all. So it was a bit like gibberish to me. So this was something that caused me a bit of frustration. And it was only when I was in my sort of early 30s, when I was working in the Middle East a lot on projects, that I decided that I'd really like to learn Arabic. So I signed up for some classes at SOAS in London. I then got into it a lot and started traveling to Damascus quite regularly, and I got myself a conversational teacher there. This was well before the Civil War. And at one point I took a voyage sort of almost across the Levant region of Lebanon, Syria, all the way down into the corner of Lebanon, then across into Jordan, and further north across sort of the Arab-speaking parts of Turkey. And I was writing a lot at the time. I was writing a daily sort of blog, which was quite well received. Now, I sent the writing after getting back to the UK to a journalist called Robert Fisk, who used to write for The Independent and was based in Beirut. He just died a year ago. And he amazingly wrote back to me and then met me afterwards as well, and gave me really quite a lot of positive encouragement and feedback. And what he said to me was that, Mohammed, you don't write as well as Mark Twain, who wrote about Damascus before, so you're not there. But you have something which Mark Twain doesn't have, or I don't have, which is that because of your appearance and because of your faith, you are trusted and welcomed into these lands easily. And probably that's the case not just in the Middle East, but probably all over Asia and probably all over Africa as well. And people take you in and they open up to you. And yet, when you write about your experiences, you write from the perspective of a Westerner. And so therefore, you have a trusted eye, yet you also have insight, and that's quite unique, and you should exploit that. So that's why I started writing the book, which is effectively travel writing, then interspersed with biographical details. So, and St. Anne's was actually quite important in that journey because it was at a point in my life where I sort of thought that I was already quite multicultural, if you like, in my outlook. But I soon realised when I got to Oxford that I was perhaps not quite as open-minded, not quite as ready to really dispassionately look across different beliefs and cultures in a way that perhaps I hadn't really ever done till I left home and went to university. So maybe a little bit of more from the book. It was an Oxford friend who described me as the Westerner one drizzly afternoon as we both sat at a favourite cafe in Marylebone. This is a friend of mine from St. Anne's. Mohammed, your way of thinking and your ideals around freedom, social responsibility, equality and respect mean you are basically a Westerner. We had debated this point many times in the past about the parallels between the philosophy of Plato, John Stuart Mill and Adam Smith and the social conscience and economic principles found within the teachings of Islam. Now, if for a moment you're beginning to think that this guy studied hard at PPE, please don't let me give you that impression. The fundamentals of what you believe in are also better catered for by this country or by America than by most Muslim nations too. Most of them are further from Islamic ideals than the West. Face it, you are a Westerner more than anything else. Unused to the label, this last statement took me by surprise. Living my life as an outsider, I'd never thought of being accepted as a Westerner. My aspirations had been restricted to being seen as British until this moment. And I think it was moments like that that really started getting me thinking about the fact that being Westerner is something which I wasn't being readily accepted for, even though I was perhaps as Western as the next person. So that, I think, to me, that sort of discussion was a bit of a revelation. And the book really just takes you through many elements of my journey, not only the border crossings, which are the sort of physical, obvious, sort of literal ones, like the one that I just read about from Heathrow Airport, but also border crossings of a more metaphorical or cultural nature, and really how I, if you like, tried to bridge sort of two rather seemingly incompatible worlds together. I'm just looking to see whether I can find something else. So let me try and give you an example of one of those metaphorical or cultural border crossing issues. So this is from when I was about a teenager working in my dad's restaurant in southeast London. The subject of alcohol created its own world of Islamic guilt-induced distortions to deal with. One evening, before opening time at the Curry Queen, one of the waiters instructed me on how to wash beer glasses whilst making minimum contact with the forbidden alcoholic contents. Carefully, he dipped a glass in and out of a basin full of hot soapy water and then expertly dried it immediately afterwards, starting from the inside with a dry cloth. He fished the glass out of the water with a flourish, which belied his pride in a perfected non-alcoholic contact technique for washing beer glasses. Tufel, that's my middle name, you know that any part of your body that comes into contact with alcohol will not enter paradise until it has been purified in the hellfire. Heavy stuff. But the first thought that came to my mind was the absurd one of a body going to heaven minus 2 hands and 4 arms, which went to hell to burn for a few hundred years instead. What if the alcohol was touched with no intention of drinking it, but to do a job such as this one for my managers who have decided to sell liquor? I asked. This question would hurt, and normally would be followed by a glance away from the elder it was directed to. If you touch it by mistake, you'll be forgiven. But you cannot be forgiven for this. This you are doing willfully and knowingly. Selling to others something which is strictly forbidden to Muslims on the ground of good health didn't make much sense to me. I couldn't see how glass rinsing techniques could, in such a context, be the most relevant issue. Whilst the washing method seemed logical, in the grand scheme of things, the technique seemed a guilty distraction. I didn't follow the advice for long, preferring to give priority to washing glasses properly, since I felt that our ethical responsibility to ensure customers ate and drank from clean utensils should take priority over keeping my hands free of diluted dregs of alcohol, which I had no intention of consuming. And so it goes on. And what you'll find in the book is that it takes you through a journey that's taken me across 86 countries that I've worked in now, lived in about 7, currently live in Australia, based in Melbourne with a wife and 2 lovely boys. And every now and then, when COVID allows, I do make it back to the UK, and hopefully we'll make it to Oxford sometime soon. So thank you ever so much. Once again, it's Border Crossings, my journey as a Western Muslim, and it's available in bookstores if you're in the UK, and it's available online as well, anywhere in the world. If you go to Amazon.com or Foyles or W.S. Smith or pretty much any book website, I think you'll be able to find it. So please do give it a try, and I do hope that our paths may cross one day. Thank you very much for giving me your time. Good night.